Welcome, everybody, to Counterclipping episode number 208 for February 3rd, 2024. I'd like to thank everybody for stopping by tonight. Let's put the banner up. We are drinking Michter's Small Batch Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, bottled at a generous 45.7%, which is an oddball number, but hey, whatever. I don't care. It's pretty good. So there's that. We are clipping The Forgotten Battles. We're still working on Germans. We'll probably still be working on Germans next week as well. We're going to try to do a Monday counterclipping show on February 17th, live from Winterfest, just so everybody knows. Historically, I've had mixed luck with that. So just so everybody is aware that that particular show might be aborted. And as I think I've mentioned a number of times already, the Chit Show is moving to Sunday night starting next Sunday. So we are done with Thursdays. The next live show will be on Sunday. So everybody tune in for that. So once again, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. If you haven't done so already, please do like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already, or follow on whatever platform you're on. That is all good by me. Super chats and super stickers are available, so if anybody wants to get their comment highlighted, I will get to it if it is a super chat or super sticker. Otherwise, there is the chance I will miss it. I do try and get everybody, but Danny, the same time, 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. So we didn't see any reason to move the slot, and just because it's on the weekend, I do think that this will end up being the permanent slot for the Chit Show, but we'll see. Stranger things have occurred. So once again, everybody tune in on Sunday night. I will throw a link to the Ardwulf's Lair Discord server in the chat here tonight. If anybody's not yet on board, I'm not putting it in the ticker anymore because I didn't feel like that worked out all that well. So we'll try and remember to throw it in the chat, and I've done better with that so far. So before we get any further, let's give a big shout out to Alistair Logie, Andrew Cook, Bayonet Brant from the Armchair Dragoons, Bert Matus, Blue Steel, Board Gaming Geezer, Charles Latour, Christophe de Klerk, Daniel Silverthorne, Danny Seckery, David Poirier, David Zell, DJ Flippy, Dustin Mitchell, E4 Airman, Ed Holtzman, Ed Meister, sorry, I need to blow this up clearly. Egret, Eric Goebel, Garrison, Ven, Grunyard Rich, the legend himself, Fucko, is here tonight. Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Joe Faust from sunny Northeast Ohio. We did actually have a little bit of sun today. Joe Hammond, Joe Gobayashi, Joe Perez, Joe Mentum, John Madison, John Nolan, John Clark, Jonathan Dyer, Carl Crater from the Wargame Boot Camp, Lee Grant, Lynn Pratt is here. Lynn, thanks for stopping by. Mark McNair, Marty Sample is in the house. Meandering Mike, Molotov Cockatiel Games, Neil Bedke, Panzer Division Lair, Paul Dangle, Paul Sin, Rob Johnson, Robert Hassler, Royce Stacking Limit is here, Stephen Rochelle, Stigler is in the house, Tim Zales, Todd Cox, Vicky, welcome back to the show, Wade Moore. Thanks once again, everybody, for coming out this evening. Timon6219, apparently I did not. I apologize to anybody else that I may have missed. So that is YouTube's fault as usual. So there's a whole bunch of links to support the show in the video description, including the Noble Knight affiliate link. We will have not only a message from Noble Knight, but we will have a campaign update this evening. I will not announce a new campaign until at least next week, and it might be after Winterfest. We will see. But big shout, well, let me get to that. So in the meantime, let me do I guess I put this under news, but I'm going to do it now. The campaign for Blood Reef Tarawa is complete. As you can see, I believe this was on Tara when it fell off the boat. But the insides, other than being punched, are fine. So finally in the Ardwulf's Lair library. So big shout out to all the folks who have contributed by using the Ardwulf's Lair affiliate link for Noble Knight Games. And a big shout out to both the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, without whose support and encouragement we could not continue doing this, as well as to our good friends at Noble Knight Games, from whom we will hear later on. So once again, thanks everybody for that. And we'll announce a new campaign in the next couple of weeks. We'll see. I have a pretty good idea what it's going to be, but I could always change my mind too. That's happened before. So I did back off on Up Against the Wall, you know who. because I didn't feel like it was going to be a value-added item here. I'm not going to do like video on that or anything like that, except like one video because it would be funny. So anyway, Alistair Logie has retired. That is fantastic. That is fantastic to Alistair. Hold on, I'm trying to find the post here. Well, I can't find the post, but congrats to Alistair for leveling up to name level, as it were. So apparently, I do feel like I overcomplicated the Patreon with too many different levels. If I were doing it again from scratch, I'm not going to change it because that sounds like an even bigger hassle. But I would make it simpler, and I'd probably have it most 3 tiers as opposed to this 6 or whatever it is I have right now. It would make making the title cards easier, if nothing else. I don't know that Zilla's doing great, but he's got a lot of ASL ahead of him, is what it looks like. So that is fantastic. I don't know if Zilla mentioned who he bought the stuff from, but it is quite a respectable ASL collection. It's got got virtually all the core stuff, and several of the HASLs as well, which tend to be the expensive pieces because maybe we'll get them reprinted, but don't count on it. So, and it is quite a rabbit hole. Anyway, all right. So in gaming news, I would really like to stop doing this, but I'm afraid I have bad news once again. I received word in the last couple of days that Carla Horger had passed away. She was Jeff Horger's wife. Jeff is a Central Ohio-based game designer known for such titles as Maneuver and Dark Designs, which Carla was Jeff's right hand on all of this stuff and had design credits of her own. So there is a GoFundMe set up for Jeff, who is also not in great health. I'm going to throw a link to this in the chat as well. So yeah, this was not great news. So I mean, I knew Carla not particularly well, but I know Jeff and Carla, and I gotta think. I mean, Jeff's gotta. I'm severely concerned about Jeff. Let me put it that way. Jeff also designed, again with Carla's help, Thunder Alley and Grand Prix and a bunch of other stuff through GMT, as well as through at least one thing they self-published. So check out the GoFundMe and help out if you can. Jeff could use the help. So there's that. Hopefully, Alistair, you've managed to avoid the typical IT skin conditions that seem to afflict everybody that works in IT. So we also have, and I'll throw that GoFundMe link in the show toward the end as well for those who missed it at the time. We do have 2 new, one's a pre-order, one's just order it now, things from MMP. One is the Winter Offensive bonus pack. I believe this has 3 scenarios and board 93. So if you're an ASL person, you probably do want this. I haven't ordered it yet. I probably should order it because it's another board and more scenarios. Who can't use that? So this is all available over on Multiman's website at mmpgamers.org. Also, people have been waiting for this for a long time. Slaughter at Ponyry. This is ASL East Front. This is a sizable historical module with 4 maps, 8 counter sheets. And it's supposed to include all the counters that you need to play the campaign game, which would be cool. I believe there have been issues with that in the past. I will also pre-order this, but I have not done so yet, unless I did. I might have pre-ordered this already, actually. I'm not sure if hey, man, I can't explain it, but after 5 years in IT, I started to accrue all kinds of strange dermatological conditions that I have no particular explanation for. So it is an IT thing. I don't know. Mark Herman, thanks for stopping by. So John MC from sunny Victoria, Australia. Hopefully it is in fact sunny down there. It is the season 4. So tonight we're going to do part 7 of our best of GMT games covering the years 2014 to 2016. And because we have 30 plus items to go through, I am going to get started basically right away. I mean, okay, man, I don't have a better idea, so maybe. Um, for me, it was on my hands, and I don't know if it was just, dehydration or what, but I had this really dry, scaly shit on my hands that fortunately hasn't come back since I left IT. So I'm not sure I have a science explanation for any of that. All right, so we're going to start in 2014 with Blue Cross White Ensign by Mike Nagel. This is an entry in the Flying Colors series, and this particular one is centered on the Imperial Russian Navy in the Age of Sail. Once again, stress is incredibly believable, actually. That is very plausible. All right, anyway. Blue Cross White Ensign. This, once again, is a bit higher scale, like half a step higher scale than something like Close Action or Wooden Ships and Iron Men, in that it's easier to run large numbers of ships. It's easier to therefore fight out large Age of Sail battles like Trafalgar or whatever. That's a good point, actually. Blue Steel, thanks for pointing this out. There is a pre-order on GMT's website at P500 for a second printing of Serpents of the Seas, which is one of the volumes in the Flying Colors series, and it is the only one that I don't have, and it is American Revolutionary War Age of Sail stuff, which is an interesting topic. So I personally would like to see it. So, Lee Grant, once again, thanks so much for the, oh wow, yeah, our best wishes for a speedy operation and recovery go with you. I am having a medical procedure done on Friday that I am not looking forward to, but it is absolutely trivial. This is a much bigger deal. Fortunately, medical science is getting pretty good at this kind of thing. Mark is playing Congress of Vienna, which ought to be making its way to me sometime in the next couple of weeks. I would think GMT should have started shipping this batch of product already, but it might take a few weeks for that to happen. However, I hope it shows up without too much trouble, because I am slated to run it at Origins. I'm running one slot of Congress of Vienna. And I've been looking forward to that for a while as well. Well, it is a reprint, Stigler, and I have noticed that reprints do sometimes tend to languish on GMT's P500. Not all the time, but sometimes at least. I would definitely like to see that get reprinted, and I personally have it on order, so I have done my share. Oh, there you go. Under an Iron Sky 4th edition from Thin Red Line Games. This might be the last printing of that, so if you're interested in this, now might be the time. And certainly you're going to get it cheaper from them than you are on the secondary market after it goes out of print in 15 minutes, as that stuff all does. So, and this is true too. GMT's been around for a long time at this point. 35 years, something like that. So give or take a couple of years, perhaps, but something like that. They have a lot, as we've seen. I'm going to need probably at least 2, maybe 3 more episodes to cover all their output. And I'm skipping stuff. I'm skipping stuff that is not wargame facing for the most part, or expansions and stuff like that, which there's a lot of that kind of stuff too. So, now that's good. That is very good. Our thoughts are with you, Lee. All right, so moving on from Blue Cross White Ensign. Now I've got this. This seems to not be an incredibly popular entry in the series. It is, after all, a bit of an odd topic, and not the kind of thing we will typically think of when we think of Age of Sails, like Russian Imperial Navy. Okay, well, that's cool. We, at least Americans, probably tend to think of such engagements as involving the Americans, the British, the French, and the Spanish, and maybe the Dutch. There are some important Dutch naval engagements as well, but this gives us, there's some Swedes in here too, so it's actually pretty cool. I think this got pulled because they're planning to do a deluxe edition of the Napoleonic Wars at some point. It is worthy of that, and that is my guess. So I would certainly expect to see a new edition of the Napoleonic Wars at some point. It's an excellent game. All right, next up, this is the new cover for the next printing of it, or the last printing of it, one or the other, of Next War Taiwan, from again from 2014. And as we talked about last week from about Next War Korea, this evolved out of Gene Billingsley's design, Crisis Korea 1995. I haven't ever looked at that, but it is my impression that the Next War games are a step up in complexity from that, particularly if you are using the advanced game, which, as I also mentioned last week, I think is where the soul of this game system lies. I would strongly recommend at least trying the advanced game. And if the advanced game doesn't work for you, then the whole series might not work for you, to be honest. So I know that Mark McLaughlin, who's the designer of Napoleonic Wars, has plenty of other things going on. So I don't know what any details are, but there will be definitely be a third edition at some point, right? Well, I shouldn't say definitely, but we believe there will be a third edition at some point. In any case, Next War Taiwan looks like it. I don't know if this is currently out of print or not. It certainly might be. I've got the previous edition of it, and I'm satisfied with that personally. I've got all of the Next War games except for Iran, which just came out. And I guess expansion number 4 is on P500 as well. So I need to move that over just a little. Oops. Hold on one second here. There we go. That's better. All right. I believe I have expansion number 4 on P500 as well, I think. So John C. says, John, welcome back to the show. Thinks the third edition is being done by Gareth Williams. Next word. This isn't even funny. All right. But thank you, John, for the effort. Anyway, Enemy Coast Ahead, Operation Chastise, the Dambuster Raid. So this is a Jerry White design, and there's a second game in the series about the Doolittle Raid, and I think both of these are both interesting topics and pretty interesting designs. This is a procedural solitaire game, but unusually you kind of start. It's not exactly explicit programmed instructions, but you have a set of scenarios, and you start with scenario 1, which is pretty much the end. You're dropping the bombs. And then as you proceed through the scenarios, you gradually get more and more until you end up with a pretty elaborate campaign involving planning the mission and keeping the information about the mission out of the hands of Axis agents and all that stuff. I haven't actually played anything but the first scenarios out of either of these, and they look amazing. And if Jerry would like to do more of these, I would be delighted to buy them. This has also probably gotten me interested in the Dambuster Raid in the first place. It is, again, a fairly interesting topic. I think there's a movie about it. They had to invent special bombs that would like skip across the water to do this mission in the first place. And, you know, similar considerations go into, although I don't know that they invented new bombs, but similar considerations go into the Doolittle Raid as well. These are pretty cool. And especially once you get into like the whole, I'm calling it a campaign, although I don't think either book does. The last scenario where you do all the mission planning and stuff, I think that's really, really, really cool. And it does make you want to watch the movie, although I have not watched the movie. And I'm not sure if it's considered a good movie or not, even by war movie standards, which are a little different than like movie critic standards. This, I'm also not sure if this is out of print or not, but looking at the secondary market prices, it kind of looks like it is, which is not particularly surprising. I think that if you are running the small scenarios, there's no real easy way to split this to do it co-op. But even as early as the like some of the early missions where you can like split targets and stuff like that, I think you could get away with doing at least some of these scenarios co-op. So now 30 Seconds Over Tokyo I have seen, but I saw it when I was a kid, so I wouldn't trust my memory of it. And I can verify that 30 Seconds Over Tokyo is, by like historicity standards, I'm not sure it's I'm not sure it's that good. So, All right, moving on from Enemy Coast Ahead, the first volume, that is, we have Mark Herman and Volko Ruhnke's Fire in the Lake. This is an entry in the Coin series, and it is one of, I think this was the fourth or fifth game in the series, maybe the sixth, something like that. And this is kind of the one I was waiting for, right? Is like, well, you know, this whole coin thing, it's a golden opportunity to do Vietnam, right? And this is that game, and I've played it, and I like it a lot. Depending on what day you ask me, this might be cited as my favorite coin game. I kind of waffle between this one and Pendragon most of the time, but several of the other ones are good. It's just that, you know, I'm more interested in some topics than others. Anna Blinken sub, Michael Pinka, EL, and Cardboard Commander, welcome to the show. So this is, I'm not sure if I said this, this is probably one of the more complicated coin games. And I would probably, unusually for this kind of thing, like the different commands and colors games that GMT does, for example. I don't know what the ratings are. I'm not looking them up, the complexity ratings on those games. While Napoleonics is a little more complicated than Ancients, it's not much more complicated. This is noticeably more complicated than, say, Cuba Libre or Falling Sky or something like that. Nevertheless, it is a very full-throated presentation of the Vietnam War with all its political angles and stuff like that. And with the expansions, you can also play it from... I forget when the Sovereign of Discord expansion starts exactly, but you could play a big part of this entire conflict. Let me put it that way. All right, so and I like this cover too. I mean, it is kind of It is the cover you expect on a Vietnam game. Let me put it that way. But nevertheless, I think it's a strong cover. So there's that. I've got this. I don't have the Solitaire bot replacement, but I do have the 2 expansions that actually expand the game. I would love. I like Distant Plain as well a lot. I think Distant Plain is really strong. I think my interest level in this topic is just more than it is for Afghanistan. But if anybody feels differently about it, I think that's completely understandable. There you go. John C. mentions that Sovereign of Discord. And the other expansion is Fall of Saigon. Sovereign of Discord starts in 1961. So another thing with coin games in general is that this is not a direct response to you, Mike Reed, but is that usually there's kind of, even though most of the games, not all of them, there's some exceptions, most of the games do have 4-player positions, and usually the positions are kind of arranged into 2 general sides. And in some coin games, those sides are bound fairly tightly together. The success of one is to some extent dependent on the success of the other. In other coin games, that is less of a factor, and it's more of a free-for-all. In this particular case, there are definitely some links between the 2 sides, where one side is playing the NVA and the Viet Cong, the other side is playing the government of South Vietnam and the United States. And I think that some of the ways that the coin mechanics interact with the political realities of what's going on in the United States at this same time, I think are really elegant and well done. So, Brand has played a lot of A Distant Plain as well. I'd say it's kind of at the top. I mean, again, it's not a huge difference, but I think in the case of coin, I think that the complexity variation does vary by as much as 1 point on the GMT scale. I would really like to see, well, I've seen it already. I would really like to play Red Dust Rebellion. That might be a thing that gets ordered in the GMT sale whenever it happens. So Fire in the Lake, it's been printed at least a couple of times. I'm sure it's going to get printed again. It kind of looks like it might be out of print right now, but you do get a lot of stuff in the box too. So there's that. Excellent. Doug Sessions picked up Alliance from Columbia Games. So FYI, I will be running 2 slots of that at Origins as well. So if you happen to be going, stop by. It accommodates up to 7 people. So there's that. All right, next up is Hoplite by Richard Berg and Mark Herman. This is Persian Hellenistic Age, so 4th, 5th century BC, Greeks and Persians fighting. This includes one of the very biggest battles in the series, which is Plataea, right. But it also includes Marathon and some other stuff as well. There's considerable variation between mechanics in different Great Battles of History games. And this is an example. This has a chit pull mechanic that modifies the original, say, Great Battles of Alexander initiative mechanic. I have not played this. The blue die. I imagine it was just whatever they had on hand at the moment. They do collate that stuff in-house, so I'm not sure I care about that at all. I did have a pretty early pre-order number on Forgotten Battles as well, so just keep that in mind. If I know that some folks have not gotten theirs yet, so it will be coming. Now, I will also mention, let's look at the secondary market prices. A little bit high. There's a reprint of this on the way as well, so these prices are probably gonna maybe go down just a little bit. And I think this is Plataea. So you can see this is a pretty large battle by GBOH standards, and it's 2 maps as well. So there we go. We're keeping score on the chit pull. I would like to try it because I'm not sure how I feel about I'm not sure how I feel about changing a mechanic that I liked already. Let me put it that way. So this is a good question. I know I've had mine for a while, and I did get it directly through GMT. I will notice if you don't know, it's on Goodreads. It's listed on Goodreads and on Storygraph, which is like an independent alternative to Goodreads with less features, but it's, they're still working on it too. So there's that. I am still reading it. I was focusing on the fantasy book I was reading for the last week or so, and I finished it last night. So I'm going to try and get some more of Mr. Herman's book in the next day or two. So anyway, moving on from Hoplite, we have Twin Peaks. This is another one that feels like it sat around in GMT's warehouse for quite a while, and now it's kind of pricey. Looking at these prices, here's a Canadian edition for $150. Noble Knight wants $269 for it. You can get it cheaper, but I don't know, if you want to get it from the UK or not. So this is 2 battles, South Mountain and Cedar Mountain. And I picked this up originally because I actually had Cedar Mountain from the original Great Battles of the American Civil War series from SPI back in the day. And I never played it. Now I've reacquired that. And at some point I would like to do like a compare and contrast between new version versus old version. That could still happen with Cedar Mountain, but there's also equivalents in Death Valley as well. So there's Newmarket, for example, which is in... Is it Newmarket? It's not behind me anymore. At least one, maybe both of the battles in Jackson and Corinth are in Death Valley. Well, it's definitely the Jackson part of it, isn't it? So, since Corinth is nowhere near the valley. This also adds South Mountain. So there's a 2-sided map in here. You get 2 full games. I've never played any game on the topic of South Mountain. At one point, this was a very good and natural starting point for GBACW. But at this point, with it basically coming out anytime meaning probably in the next 2 months, maybe 3, I would say by Swords and Bayonets is definitely the place to look. I have not played either of these battles in the new current GBACW system. I thought I had for a second while I was putting this together, but then I realized, no, I punched it because we actually needed some of the markers for 3 Days at Gettysburg. So here's another thing, and we've mentioned this. Yeah, let's not do the politics thing, please. Thank you. I just don't want to deal with it, and nobody's here for that. So let's steer clear of it. If you want to go talk about that, there's plenty of places to do that. I figure folks are not necessarily here for that. So I will back Mr. Stacking Limit up on this. South Mountain is being reimagined in Gleam of Bayonets 2 by Greg Laubach, and I am looking forward to that. Both for the, hey, we're going to get a new Antietam, and for a new version of South Mountain. And I think it will be it's nice to have that battle. It is actually kind of an important battle. So now, if it comes to, I don't know that one thing I wouldn't necessarily object to people talking about is kind of strategies for dealing with what shipping costs nowadays, and that I don't consider that situation to be stable at this exact moment. Let me put it that way. So, Adam Blinkenstop. So I would, if you just can't wait, buy Death Valley. It's got tons of small battles in it. If you can wait like a month or two, get by Swords and Bayonets, which is all small battles. So now the name, of course, Berg had a flair for names that he didn't mind that they were not necessarily anachronistic. Many people think of the show, of course, when you say the name Twin Peaks, and I think there might even be another game called Twin Peaks as well, which might be based on the show. So yeah, I just don't want to deal. I don't want to deal with it. If at some point in a future show we talk about shipping strategies, then I can get along with that, because then it's going to be kind of part of the equation, and I will have asked for it. But as it is, I don't want to deal it. All right, Tom MC, can't wait for Rebel Fury on Steam. I'm looking forward to that too, actually. Plus, RBM Studios has released Waterloo on Steam as well. And of course, we all know Roger's situation, but they do have a makeshift office running, and they're starting to, Roger's able to like communicate regularly with people again. So, it looks like things are looking good, and the wargaming community really stepped up for Roger in his situation. And I am sure that we as a community will step up for Carla as well. So, plus, this is the last I'm going to use the P word. Okay. I don't think that anybody is here for that. Right. So if that's what you want to talk about, cool. Just, do it somewhere else. It becomes contentious too easily. I don't want that kind of vibe on the show. And again, I'm convinced that nobody is tuning in for that. So, that's not to say I don't have opinions. I have opinions, just like everybody else does. But Alistair Logie, thanks so much for... Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I should have flagged this. All right, so Mark Ruggiero's estate is selling his game collection, and there's a whole bunch of information available about it. There's a process for it. It's like a silent auction type of deal. That's linked on my Discord, as well as it's all over Facebook as well, in pretty much all the places where people knew Mark, which for, in wargaming spaces on Facebook, that's basically everywhere. So folks, the second of those two things would just be weird. Okay. And Alistair, of course, again, thanks so much for the support. It is much appreciated. And all the proceeds, nobody's keeping a nickel out of it. All the proceeds will go to Mark's widow. So anyway, yeah, you can get a bundle for Gettysburg and Waterloo as well. I think I strongly preferred Waterloo over Gettysburg, just because I feel like the mechanic was a better match for the scale that Mark picked in Waterloo, and that's basically the same scale that applies in Rebel Fury and Army of the Potomac, and presumably in forthcoming games from that. Danny, I have high hopes for this game. I know a lot of people have complained about the rule book, but I've looked through it, and I've dealt with like bad rule books, and I don't think this one's that bad. So I want to try it. So yeah, and I think they are selling everything as well, as Dave points out. And I feel like I've got a lot of magazine games as well. I am pumped about new GBACW Antietam because while I have the original Gleam of Bayonets, and kudos to TSR for doing it, I guess, but I do think that the new system, while it is more complicated than the old system, it's a better fit for me personally. Let me put it that way. I think that lots of people in America don't have the vaguest idea about what Greek pronunciation is like. So, all right, moving on from Twin Peaks. We have 1914 Glory's End / When Eagles Fight. So this is 2 games in one. Both Ted Racer World War I designs. Both originally appeared in Challenge magazine, probably in the 90s, but I'm not running down the issue numbers. I have played both of these. I think they are both very good. I do think that When Eagles Fight, which is the East Front of World War I, is a better game. Glory's End, 1914 Glory's End is the first 3 months of the West Front. And it's a good game too, but I think When Eagles Fight is a very strong game. I have video on this. I made tons of mistakes. Go watch it if you want to. Just Dare Not Rules writing. Did I say Challenge Magazine? I think I did. Thanks, Marty. I did, in fact, mean Command Magazine. So, there we go. This sounds awesome, actually. In any case, this was also a really nice value package when it was out. It is out of print now in that you got like 2 full games in it, and neither of those games are tiny, right? I think there's probably 2, 3, maybe 3 counter sheets in the thing. There's 1 double-sided map, I can tell you that, and separate rule books for the 2 sides. They are not quite the same system. They are similar, but you actually got to read both rule books separately. So, moving on from that, we've got a divisive game from Mr. Berg, Genesis. The rating on this on BGG is not half bad, but I've heard a lot of people express that they have various issues with this. A lot of those issues seem to come down to balance, which I care less about. Now, this is a point-to-point. Let me see if I can find some images of it. This is a point-to-point. Yeah, here we go. This is apparently a vassal extract, but there's the map. It's a handsome-looking map, and as you can see, it is a point-to-point map. Do we have any shots of the cards here? It would be cool if we did, but I don't see them. There are cards. And it is a I would call it a card-driven game, I think, but it's not necessary. It's not a Herman-esque ops points type of mechanism. Meandering Mike has covered this game, so check that out if you are interested. Now, what attracted me to this, and I do have this, and I would like to play it at some point. It is fundamentally a multiplayer game. Can you solo it? Yeah, probably, but you are losing the cards and all that stuff. What really attracted me to this is its ancient Mesopotamia, which is a game topic we don't see very much of at all. It is a multiplayer game, which does kind of make it harder to arrange. Wow, look at these dice. These are obviously some kind of replica dice of the old TSR dice. So bravo to this individual for finding those. I think I saw somebody kickstart those at some point. So I'd like to try this. The player's aid may actually have some video on this as well, now that I think about it. Well, one thing I can tell you, Danny, is that it's better with Peter Gabriel. So there you go. Anywhere near successors? I mean, very broadly, sure, but not. The mechanics are pretty different from what I know of both games. And I have not played either game, and I've never owned the successors. I have had this for quite a while, so I'm not a big fan of Gabriel's later solo stuff. I'm not a big fan of Gabriel's solo stuff after the first album or two. Let me put it that way. So in any case, this is one I'd like to play. Maybe Nursery Crime's a good idea. My personal favorite Genesis album is Selling England by the Pound, which I think might be their second or third album. Something like that. Some people say they don't like From Genesis to Revelation, which is the first album, but I think it's pretty good. I just don't think it's as good as a couple other things. It's not as good as Nursery Crime. It's not as good as Selling England by the Pound, and it's not as good as The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And I do consider Lamb Lies Down on Broadway to be a bit on the bloated side, to be honest. I will disagree with this to the extent that I do think that there were at least 2 and maybe 3 or maybe even 4 good Genesis albums after Gabriel left. But Invisible Touch On, dead to me. Dead to me. I fucking hate that album passionately. So, yeah, I would agree. This is Marty says Successors was closer to a pure CDG than Genesis, and I think that's an accurate statement. There are definitely similarities to Pax Romana. So stay tuned. I might have a better opinion on it at a later time. Abacab in particular is post Peter Gabriel, and I think is a pretty strong album. Duke's pretty good too. So, I don't like the fact. I just think he's uninteresting and has been uninteresting for a long time. I think Sledgehammer was the end of Peter Gabriel's interesting music, if you ask me. Maybe there's something I'm not thinking of. In any case, moving on from both that and Genesis, as we can see, there's a bit of a premium on this thing at the moment. I believe Trick of the Tail is the first post. I might be misremembering this. I believe Trick of the Tail is the first post Gabriel album, and it's pretty good. So, all right. So moving on from Genesis, we're making excellent time. Here's one I have no idea about at all. Medieval Conspiracy. This is apparently a GMT thing. Let's look at versions here. I think this is not a GMT product, to be completely honest. There you go. Brant says that the origins, I'll explain what he means here. This is the Wargaming HQ number of events that are being run in that area is 173 events. I think that doesn't count the War College. So for some reason, I'm going to skip this. I don't know anything about it anyway. So designed by Dietrich Potthoff and Stefan Rensing. It looks busy, but not necessarily bad. I just don't know anything about it. So maybe it's neat, and maybe I'll get a chance to check it out at some point today. Not today, but it's someday. All right, Triumph and Tragedy, designed by Craig Basink. Craig Basink is one of the most experienced block wargame designers, and this is a block wargame, but it is a fairly unusual block wargame in a couple of respects, and I have played this 2 or 3 times at this point. I like it. It is excellent. So this is a World War II sandbox game with 3 sides. Now, they did eventually include some kind of solitaire mode in this, and maybe in a second printing or on the website or something like this. I haven't tried that. What I can tell you is that I strongly didn't like the 2-player version that is included in the rulebook in the original game. I think the game itself is very strong. You really want 3 players for it. So it's World War II in Europe. There's 3 sides, the Western Allies, the Axis, and the Soviets, and it's every person for themselves. The interesting wrinkle here is it's a block game, right? A hidden information block game. So you kind of got to, sit at 3 corners of a 4-sided board, which is slightly awkward, but it is, having done it, it is doable. Carl Fung is here. Carl, thanks for stopping by, as well as Hexy. I am with you on this, Adam Blinkensop. I think you are best served and will have the best experience playing this with 3 sides. This is a little bit true. However, I do think it would be an outlier if no general war with all 3 sides involved ever broke out. I think that would be unusual. This is unusual for war games anyway. 3-player positions is fairly unusual. A lot of times, if we had 3 players in the gaming group, it would be Churchill because it accommodates 3 players, right? You will end up with but to Triumph and Tragedy. Don't get too attached to the history, right? This is a sandbox game. It will rage wildly ahistorically. There is no guarantee that it's going to be the Axis versus the Western Allies teaming up with the Soviets. There's no guarantee it's going to break out that way. I don't have anything to say about Maria other than that it's supposed to be good, along with Friedrich. So, Battle for Germany is a 2-player game, though. That technique wouldn't, to turn a multiplayer game into a 2-player game, would not work with this. There is a follow-up to this called Conquest and Consequences, which is the Pacific, which I have also played and which I expected to be kind of a dud. It was surprisingly entertaining. Marty says that Cataclysm is more sandboxy than Triumph and Tragedy, and I think he's probably right about this, but I have played Cataclysm exactly once, and I was not crazy about it when I did. And that was several years ago at an Origins with the Player's Aid, actually. And they liked the game. It didn't really work for me on that playthrough, but I do have this 3 strikes rule, so I am willing to try it again. I'm just not going to go buy it for the sake of trying it again. You know what I'm saying? So, this is another good point. We're still in the anti-tank stuff. I do think that this game is straightforward enough. It's pretty straightforward, and I think non-war gamers would get the gist of it pretty easily, right? So it could easily be a good game for that. Now, when I've played it, it took quite a while to play that first game, but we were kind of figuring it out. So it does play considerably faster if everybody at the table knows what they're doing. So moving on to Triumph and Tragedy, and this has seen at least a couple of printings too. If you are going to acquire this, I would strongly recommend acquiring a copy of the later printings, which come in a 3-inch box, as opposed to a 2-inch box. This shit does not fit in a 2-inch box. I believe the later printings come with a mounted map as well, so there's that. The original? I'm not sure the original did. Does the... I know that the new one from Decision does, though. And you can totally do that. That totally works. So, all right. So, moving on from Triumph and Tragedy, we'll hear from Noble Knight in a couple of minutes. Speaking of Churchill, here we go. This is Big Three Struggle for Peace. Mark describes this as not a war game. I agree with him, but there is a wargaming element to it, in that there is basically a track, which, thinking about it, this never occurred to me until just like a month or two ago. There is sort of a war progress track, multiple tracks, really, that kind of the game operates around, but the heart of the game is in what happens at the peace conferences. But you still have to pay attention to what's going on in the actual war. You still need to win the actual war, and if you can't team up between the 3 great powers to the extent that you can win the war, then you're kind of hosed. It is, again, a 3-player game. The U.S., the Soviets, and the U.K. are the 3 sides in this case. They all play quite differently. I have had I've played this 4 or 5 times, I think, and I like this game a lot. I have thought, wow, that's actually an interesting point, because I do know that when I got back into war games, one of the first like new things that had just come out that I was like, ooh, this looks cool, I need this, was Churchill. And I ran out and bought it at the Soldiery. Yeah, I think the Soldiery in Columbus, I believe. We still had war games at the time. And this can totally happen if it plays right in Churchill. The one thing that people have complained about, which is a feature that I actually like, is the somewhat unusual victory conditions. As is typically the case, you want to end up with the most victory points at the end, but if your lead over the second place player, and Mark will correct me if I'm saying anything that's grossly incorrect here, if your lead over the second place player is too big, then you will in fact not win, because the presumption is that in the post-war world, the other 2 powers will align against you. and you will, in fact, come in second place, and the person that came in second will actually be the winner. That's very unusual, and some people really don't like that. But I did like this, and I have actually won a game of this based on that criteria. It is a little bit easy because it doesn't seem like you're giving up if you're playing the Soviets or the US, it doesn't seem like you're giving up a whole lot if the British keep all their colonial possessions, the British Empire is still around at the end of the war. That result is probably going to end up with that exact victory condition where the British are way ahead on points, and either the US or the Soviets actually win the game. So there you go. Yeah. I don't remember exactly. It was really right around 2009, 2010 when I started thinking about it, but I'm not sure exactly how long it took me to figure out that there were actually other war games getting played that weren't ASL. So I do like the cover that they've shown off for In the Shadows. It's a pretty slick looking cover and thematically appropriate as well. All right, so I think Churchill is great. There's been a couple of printings of this already. Looks like these are roughly retail price here, so it may still be available at this point. I like it a lot. It is definitely more of a political game. There's a wargaming angle, but the heart of the game is in the politics and in the card play and in I forget what the terminology is, but you'll see this on the board. You'll see this 3-stage axis where you can kind of negotiate using the cards. You can also just negotiate, but you play the cards to move various issues for each of the conferences toward you on the track. And if the turn round ends and you're in control of that particular topic, then it falls your way. There you go. I'm not sure I knew that. Oh, I'm not sure I knew this either. Old Guard Tower West guys, Todd, Mike, and the gang have opened a new shop in Dublin called The Round Table. Well, I work in Dublin, so I might actually check that out. I will agree. Churchill does come with a solitaire mode. I didn't like it. I just decided the first time I played it, I just played all 3 sides, and it was fine. You are not going to necessarily have the best experience that way, but for that purpose, it was fine. And I got to play it again, like with actual humans, not very long later. Let me put it that way. Carl, thanks for stopping by. We'll catch you on the flip side. So yeah, I like Churchill a lot. I have not yet figured out Pericles, but I have the intention of doing so at some point. So last week, in the previous episode of this series, we talked about 1914 Offensiva Outrance by Mike Resch. This is the follow-up and what I kind of suspect at this point will be the last game in this sequence that GMT does, Serbian muss sterben. So this is 1914. The Austro-Hungarian army is invading Serbia, and the Serbians are putting up a bigger fight than the Austrians expected. So I've got this as well. This is, if you are going to get into this series to the extent that it is a series, and it's kind of a series, but there are significant mechanical changes between game 1 in the series, which is Twilight in the East, and game 2 in the series, which is Offensiva Outrance. And there's living rules available on the internet somewhere that I think make some additional changes. Topically, I think this is also pretty interesting and is, again, a topic that it's World War I, so it's not super duper obscure, but we don't get too many games on just this. You know what I'm saying? This is true, although it's not like... So you are supposed to save the sprues. I think in Offensiva Outrance and in this one, I think you are supposed to save the sprues to divide the command areas. You could use blocks or dice or whatever. It's not the end of the world if you threw those away, but I kept mine. So there's that. So this one looks like it's going for a bit of a premium. This is no longer available at this point. You can see what I'm searching for on eBay over here, too. I've got these John Gill's trilogy on the 1809 campaign in the Danube Valley. I have the ebooks. I would like the physical books, and I'm unwilling to pay what Amazon wants for them. There you go. So, as Mark has clarified, the player with the highest score wins if his score is greater than the other two players combined. So there you go. There you go. So there's like a way out even of that if you like completely run away with it. But I have, gotta make sure, there's some anti-tank units in with the alert units, which all come out, I'm talking about Forgotten Battles now, which all get drawn randomly out of a cup. So those should all get stored together. So, in any case, I think this game is worth a look, especially if you're interested in this topic, and it's crunchy, but it is what it is. All right, next up, after this one, we will hear from our good friends at Noble Knight. We have Carl Parodi's No Retreat, the Italian Front, 43 to 45. This is the one game in the series that I was really genuinely legit excited to do. And I set it up and started reading the rules, and I was absolutely mystified as to how you were supposed to play this. There was a wargaming YouTuber who I used to watch 10 years ago or whatever it was, who had some content on this, and he took so much bullshit from commenters that he deleted his entire channel, and that's too bad. So, because this is an interesting topic, and we don't get games on the whole Italian campaign, including Sicily, all that often. If we look at the map, this is probably an electronic version of the map. I want to say that this northern section right here is actually on the back of Sicily, based on the, and everything's mounted here, by the way. So based on the fact that once you've cleared Sicily, then you flip the map up, you say Sicily is under Allied control, and you flip the map over and stick it on the north of Italy here. Not because he made videos on this. He just took... he had a lot of unkind commenters commenting on his videos. It wasn't this specifically. But I thought his videos were generally excellent, and he has well presented and well spoken, and he had good lighting and all that. And I don't remember what his name was. So that is unfortunate. I might be able to dig that up on BGG, though. That's possible, but I'm not going to look for it right now. That's for sure. So this, oh, there we go. So Suka Joe has a 2-hour video on this game. That was afterwards, though. Joe came, I remember when Joe did this, and I think I still have it queued up to watch. But that was after I had already bounced off the thing. And I was trying to figure it out by trying to watch videos for No Retreat Russian Front and figuring it out from there. And I'm I'm not putting this together for whatever reason. It probably is as simple as I need to play it with another human being. So that is possible. Oh, there we go. So Legion Wargames has a sale on some stuff, so check that out, as John C. Has pointed out. As I recall, Ted Racer's The Dark Sands does something quite similar by splitting the map into the areas where the action actually occurs, rather than having a lot of dead space in the Western Desert. No Retreat North Africa is not the only game to do that, but I believe that it predated Ted's game as well. Ted's game looks a little more my style, but I don't have that either. I'm not sure how I feel about this, to be honest. When I hear small hexes, I think of Struggle of Nations from Avalon Hill, where the counters that actually go on the map are 1/2 inch by 1/4 inch rectangular counters. I have that game, and mechanically it doesn't seem absolutely ridiculous, but that's absolutely ridiculous because they are very difficult to handle. So there's that. All right. So moving on from No Retreat. And right now we're going to hear from our good friends at Noble Knight Games, the official sponsors of the Counter Clipping show. Let me get it all set up here. Take it away, Noble Knight.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, so once again, big shout out to Noble Knight Games, the official sponsors of the Counter Clipping Show, and there is a affiliate link in the video description. And if you use that affiliate link, it's not complicated, but you won't get a confirmation. Just click there to get to Noble Knight's website and buy stuff that you were going to buy anyway. And I get a little bit of a kickback in the form of store credit, which has added up a lot faster consistently than I thought it would. So thanks to everyone using the Noble Knight affiliate link. All right, so moving on from No Retreat, the Italian Front, we have Next War, India, Pakistan. This is the only game in this series that I have played, and we only played one of the basic scenarios, and that is what has led me to the conclusion that you probably, if you're that interested in this topic, I mean, the basic game is not particularly complicated, but and it's not hard to learn, but there's also not that much to it. I really feel like you want to be using the advanced air and naval stuff, especially with this series. That said, there's really not all that much air and no naval to speak of in this particular game, so you can just not have to worry about that. I should try and do deck at some point, actually, because I've got it, and although all 5 maps won't fit on the table, I could... Like Perfidious Albion mentions, there's a ton of scenarios in it, so you don't have to play with all 5 maps. And I think you can even play the campaign without the easternmost map, which has Alexandria, the Nile Delta, and stuff like that on it. I wonder if the pyramids are on the map. That would be neat. I'm not sure I remember that detail or not. I would bet $5 that DAC nor DAC 2 will ever be reprinted. And I say that because that's the specific example of the case that Multiman apparently had going on with stock on this, where it apparently took them forever to sell the last 100 or 150 copies, like forever. They were deep discounts on it and all that stuff. So, despite the fact that it looks like a good game. So it's one of the OCS games that I haven't played. I guess I can say that I haven't played any of the OC... That's not true. I'd have to figure it out. I haven't played a couple of the older ones. I haven't played Hubis Pocket, for example, but there's no reason to play Hubis Pocket now. I've got Third Winter. There are some differences, but in the counters and the maps, this might have been the only difference. I know that... in, say, Guderian's Blitzkrieg 2, which did get reprinted, there are some relatively minor counter sheet differences, at least one of which is the Army Group, what would it be? The Army Group South mechanic from the first printing of Guderian's Blitzkrieg 2, where you actually track the progress of Army Group South at the bottom edge of the map with a counter. They moved to a different, slightly different anyway, mechanic that doesn't require that counter in the second version of GB2. Other than that, as far as I'm aware, the only real difference is the colors of the counters. That the second printing has slightly darker counters consistently. So, well, like you said, Stuart, thanks for stopping by. Like you said, you don't have to play the campaign. There's plenty of scenarios in any of the big OCS games. All right, Brant, thanks for stopping by. I know that you're supposed to be able to play DAC 2 with the DAC 1 stuff. So, and it typically it is less expensive to source a copy of DAC 1 than DAC 2. DAC, DAK, Desert Africa Corps is the big OCS Western Desert game. Big, like big. It's big. Moving on from Next War, India, Pakistan, we have Gathering Storm from Bruce Harper, part of the World at War family of games. Now, I snapped this up and its companion game, Storm Over Asia, which came out several years later, avidly because I am super duper interested in this interwar period. And one of the things that this does is it kind of lets you play sort of the pre-war situation and then transition that Gathering Storm situation into your World at War game. my understanding, based on conversations with Bruce, we've done a couple of interviews with Bruce, so check those out. Sometimes you end up with a World at War situation that's not terribly viable for World at War. And in that case, I guess you just start with the standard thing, even though you played through Gathering Storm. This is playable on its own, and I have actually only spoken to people other than like Bruce and those people. I've of the locals that I have talked to that have played this, they've only played it on their own. So there is a huge book to do the translation from your Gathering Storm situation to your World at War situation. Storm over Asia basically does the same thing for Asia and the Pacific. However, the additional variable is that there is an actual war going on starting in 1937 in China, and that game has to reflect that. I would like to try these, but I have no immediate plans to do so. The issue with this is Mark McNair is sort of implying this. The rule book for this is also true of a World at War, and it's also true of Gathering Storm, but I think it's less true of World at War than it is for these two games. These are very difficult rule books, particularly to try to learn the game from. There's a lot of setup information that really should have been presented in a better and more digestible way. For example, just setting a thing up in the first place is considerably problematic. Fortunately, there are a bunch of files. Well, there are some files available on Board Game Geek. This setup guide is specifically what I am talking about that will help you considerably in actually setting the game up. In addition to that, Bruce has a YouTube channel, and he has done some tutorial stuff on play of a Gathering Storm, so it's worth doing that. I think this is probably possible. So you're not going to actually fight the... So from the 10,000 foot vantage point, the big difference between this and, say, Days of Decision is that it is actually possible to play the war out in Days of Decision without moving it to World in Flames. That is not possible here. Once the war breaks out, you start playing a World at War. And I think I can say with some confidence that it is tuned such that it would be a real outlier if the war never broke out. I think it is essentially inevitable. And this is of course true, but it could be an interesting exercise to try to see if you could do it, I suppose. And unlike, say, World at War, which might take you a week of intense play to play, this won't. This will take you several hours to play, and that's it. So in some cases, the setup images aren't going to be helpful in terms of like showing where the units are. For something like Men of Iron, it's completely practical. For something like Dak's probably a terrible example. For something like Case Blue, absolutely not. That would totally not work. And in fact, there are images in the Goss rule, at least a couple of the Goss rule books, that you need for setup, but they do not show the unit positionings. They just show you where the command breakdowns and the fronts are. So, well, we're going to get a whole game on this, actually, in the not too distant future from GMT. So, I think this is a bit reductionist, but I mean, you can absolutely see the evolution between Third Reich to Advanced Third Reich and Rising Sun, and thence to World at War. You can 100% see the evolution, and if you are an experienced Third Reich player, then I don't think you'll have a lot of trouble with a World at War, even though it is an enormous 250 or so page rulebook. So I like having the option to like start playing before the war starts and kind of set the war up. That isn't necessarily to say that I would choose to do that every time. I certainly would not. And yes, this is absolutely true. And I believe there are vassal modules for these as well. So I would say do give this a look if you want that capability for your World at War game. I really can't I don't have a educated opinion on whether it's strong enough as a standalone game to justify buying it on its own. I have had people tell me that they think it is, but I haven't played it, so I'm not sure I can tell you. Oh, that's depressing, John. That would have been awesome, though, wouldn't it? So, anyway, moving on from Gathering Storm, we have Wing Leader Victories by Lee Brimacombe Wood. Now, I am skipping further entries in the Wing Leader series. I think this is the first one. This is air-to-air combat. Let me see if there's a... Yes, there is. So, imagine, if you will... We'll work with this. Imagine, if you will, almost all dogfighting games, right? Where you have a map, and the map represents the horizontal plane on which the action takes place. Maybe there's provisions for altitude or different altitudes between planes that are engaging in those rules. Some of them don't have that, some of them do. But it's an overhead view. Wing Leader is interesting in that it is not. It is a side-to-side view. And I have actually played this. I didn't much care for it, but again, 3 strikes rule in effect. I would try this again. There's enough people that like this that think it's good that I think it is probably worth a look. And I believe there's at least a couple other volumes in this series out, or expansions or something like that. As well. So it's interesting. Lee Brimacombe Wood knows what he is doing when it comes to this kind of game. So I am willing to give this another shot at some point, but I don't have that on the calendar at the moment. Not sure what the third-party situation is on this. It looks like it is not expensive. On the other hand, I also suspect that a lot of these copies might be played, because a lot of people played this. So... in any case, moving on. Next up is the U.S. Civil War by Mark Simonich. So I've said this a number of times before, but I'm going to say it again. So what this is it's the American Civil War on a hex map. Covers basically the entire American Civil War, except for those actions taking place out in the far west. It is card assisted in a very minor, almost trivial way. A lot of people have said that, so this is a game that is clearly inspired by Eric Lee Smith's classic Civil War from Victory Games. Mark Simonich acknowledges this in the designer's notes, and it is, that to say it that way is true. But I have also heard more people than I would like to hear this from say that this is basically just a shameless ripoff or a complete redo or a new edition of the Victory Games Civil War. And that's not true. This is its own thing that definitely took some ideas from Eric Lee Smith's Civil War game. The combat mechanism in this much more strongly resembles the combat mechanism in For the People, for example, which is another of the influences that Simonich acknowledges in the designer's notes. The other one, and I forget, Rick Young, perhaps, for Europe and Asia and Gulf, that's where the cards come in. So essentially you have like a dice differential system where Union play at the beginning of the turn, the Union player rolls a die and the Confederate player rolls a die, and both players will get a number of actions equal to the difference between the two dice. And if there are doubles, then special stuff might happen. But you also have these cards. All the cards are extra bonus actions, which are tied normally to a specific theater, like the East, West, Trans-Mississippi, or Naval. So there's like a card-assisted type of mechanic in here, but it is not a huge influence. You can't leave it out, but it's not a card-driven game in any reasonable sense, by any reasonable definition. I would be very interested in hearing what you guys think of this. I like this game a lot. It is a hex map, which is my preference for this topic, which is not necessarily to say that. So interestingly, having played U.S. Civil War, Victory Games Civil War, and War Between the States, Both of the later games, I think in U.S. Civil War's case, perhaps through the Victory Games Civil War, do, I think, show some influence from what was done in War Between the States. Some. I do also think that functionally, both the U.S. Civil War, which I think is a very strong game, and Victory Games Civil War, which is a complete classic, I think they're both better games in whatever absolute sense we want to define than War Between the States. I think War Between the States has some significant issues, but it's also got some pretty neat stuff in it too, because of its scale that these other two games just can't really include. So, as Mike Reed points out, one of the big criticisms, and this was not the case in either of the predecessor games, War Between the States or Victory Games Civil War, there is a leader schedule. Leaders come in when they historically come in, and they go out when they historically went out, either because they got killed or they get promoted on the historical timetable. It is built into the turn record track. I actually don't mind that. And that is one of the reasons why this game plays in about a quarter of the time that Victory Games Civil War does. That said, I do feel like it would have been nice to have an optional dynamic leader system in this game. Otherwise, I think he'd look better in Toronto. But yeah, that was a thing. And again, this is a thing that Simonich does address in his designer's notes, why he designed it that way. He just wanted to drop all the fussing with the leaders is I think what it boiled down to. And I can understand that. You do a lot of fussing with the leaders in the Victory Games Civil War. So, oh, very nice. So yeah, we will be I am not ready to talk about this right now, but we will be having a conversation about this particular topic at some point soon. What was that, like their knockoff of the Victory Games Civil War, or War Between the States? Because it wouldn't shock me. That was kind of FGA's modus operandi, wasn't it? And honestly, this happened in my game which is on the channel, of Victory Games Civil War. It's like the first turn, or possibly the second turn after Grant came in, Grant got killed. That's a huge problem. But then later on, Lee got killed too, which turned it into kind of an interesting dynamic, in that the Union still got Nathaniel Lyon, who in that game, if you're playing with those rules, is a pretty good leader. And Sherman, of course, and the Confederates have Stonewall Jackson, who did not get killed in that game. So I won't say that kind of thing is going to completely bust your game. However, it is very hurtful if it happens to Grant specifically early on, because he's the best early leader you have. And the rest of the early Union leaders are trash. So, with the exception of Lyon, who, if he gets killed, then I guess you're hosed. But he didn't get killed in our game. I believe that is an optional rule. But it is, and again, I can live with either implementation. I think it would have been cool had U.S. Civil War included both. So this is a game I see at almost every Wargaming centered event. Usually several games of it are played at Compass Expo, for example. I usually see it on a table at Origin, at least one table at Origins as well. So, well, I mean, I'm not saying this isn't historical. It makes sense, but it's very demoralizing to the Union player when you get Grant killed on literally turn 3. So, well, given the scale for the people, I think that, or I don't even necessarily think I want to say scale, but I think that doing it this way makes a lot of sense for the people, because it's point to point for one thing, and you have cards in the game that can do things like this, so you can just have a card. And this eliminates the necessity of having a renegade leader who some people feel would have been a really effective leader had he not gotten killed relatively early very early in the war. So, there we go. Anyway, moving on from U.S. Civil War. I think this is a very strong game, and I recommend that people do try it out. It is different It is a different experience than the Victory game Civil War. It'll feel a lot like it, but it'll also feel pretty different from Victory Erkley Smith's Civil War when you play it as well. All right, I put this in. We've talked about this enough. I'm just pointing out that in 2015 or thereabouts, the folks at GMT did the new edition of the Great Battles of or another. Hold on one second. In 2015 or thereabouts, GMT did another new edition of the Great Battles of Alexander, and this is what I call the Great Battles of Alexander Expanded Deluxe Edition, because there was a deluxe edition before this, and this has a lot more stuff in it than that deluxe edition. The one Mark says 2014, and I believe Mark in a heartbeat over whatever date Board Game Geek might have. All right. So, Richard Berg, Mark Herman, there's a lot of great battles in this. If you have this particular version, there's two different versions of this version, unfortunately. There's the first printing that was in this box, which did not include the Tyrant expansion. The most recent printing of this box does include the Tyrant expansion. Tyrant is battles against the tyrants of Syracuse. It's a pretty interesting scenario pack. And I ran it down. I managed to get it, I think, from Enterprise Games, as the expansion. But then when GMT reprinted the last batch, you could get just Tyrant if you wanted. So I ordered it just so I would have the Tyrant counters on the thicker counters. So, yeah, I think this is unfortunate, but if that's the way the chemistry lands, then that's just the way the chemistry lands. I don't think we've seen the end of GBOH, but we might not see any more new GBOH games. On the plus side, there is an immense quantity of material for Great Battles of History that is already about floating around. So it's not like you're going to run out of stuff to do. Mark, I will buy this in a heartbeat if you decide that you are going to do it. So, but yeah, highly recommended. This is an incredibly value-packed box too. So if you can get the latest edition from GMT, I say do it. Assuming you are interested in Tactical Ancients or Grand Tactical Ancients. All right, we talked about Red Winter last week, and this is the companion game in the same series, Operation Dauntless, which is France 1944, by designer Mark Mazicki. This is like one of these really super high saturation maps. It doesn't look bad, but it is not. It is a map that was, when this came out, a little bit outside my comfort zone, and I think I now think this map looks pretty decent. So it is not the sort of typical low saturation graphics that we typically see on wargame maps. Let me put it that way. But at this point, there's been a lot of other games that have done map art like this. So, well, kind of. I mean, but it does use a related system to Red Winter. So if there is a companion game, it is Red Winter. It is kind of the anti-Simonich, Joe Youst, Roger McGowan, or even, well, I was going to say Redmond Simonson too, but Mr. Simonson did in fact do a couple of really like maps in a couple of different places. So, was it Demon? I forget whether it's Demons or Sorcerer or something like that. So, I do like this map, and I think the counters look nice enough too. If I had to guess, I kind of smell like counter art by Charlie Kibler. There we go. So, map art by Mark Mahaffey. Art direction by Roger McGowan. So, this game is one of those games, along with Red Winter, actually, it never seemed to be like widely adopted or particularly widely talked about, but those people who have played it seem to have a pretty positive opinion of it. I should remember this because I have Sorcerer. I don't have Demons. The Sorcerer map, actually, if you think about it, the Sorcerer map reminds me a lot of the map for Titan. So the problem with Mark Mahaffey's maps is that I think he's a talented artist, a good artist. However, there's sometimes a lack of attention paid to the details of you actually have to play a game on this map, and that has bitten me in a couple of places. One is the original maps for the Dark Valley. The first edition of that had Mahaffey maps, and they redid them for the second printing because when you're setting up like the Soviets in that Leningrad area, good luck finding where the operational boundaries are because they are virtually invisible. I had the same issue with the hex grid in Russia, with the worst place for this to happen, in Balance of Powers, which also has a Mark Mahaffey map. Now, a lot of people complained about the graphics in Balance of Powers, but I thought the graphic design, well, I thought artistically, I think the game is really nice. I don't mind the counters at all. I don't mind the map style at all, but there are contrast problems in several places in that game on both the maps and the counters, and that is problematic. So this may be, I don't know Mark Mahaffey, so maybe that's possible. I think he's a good artist. I like the way his maps look generally, but they may or may not be easy to play on, and I do think that's a problem. My eyes are not any younger. Are older than they used to be. Let me put it that way. All right. So Fast Action Battles. This will be the last of the Fast Action Battles games that we cover because it is the last one, I believe. Golan 73. This is what it sounds like. Arab-Israeli War, October War, 1973. And this is the Golan Heights. And it is, like the other games in the Fast Action Battle series, a hidden info block game. Not sure I remember whether there are cards in this or not. I didn't have this one. I had the Sicily one, but I'm not sure I remember whether there are cards in this game system or not. I like the Balance of Powers map too. It's just really hard to find the hex grid in Russia specifically. And it's also hard to tell that the counters, some of the backs of the counters, the reduced sides, have a black band across them because the color is so dark. I'm specifically talking about the French. So Adam Blinkensup and David Imperato both confirm that this is no cards. So, but apparently there's some kind of chit mechanism as well. So I never got to play this. I have at this point 2 games on the October War as a topic, one of which is October War. Thanks, Mr. Herman, for designing that. And the other is Valley of Tears, which I look forward to playing at some point. It is not a topic of high interest to me. It's a topic I've kind of steered away from because it's like I got enough topics, right? But I couldn't say no to Valley of Tears, and I couldn't say no to October War either. So, and it is an interesting topic. It's just that I can't follow every friggin' thing, right? All right, so moving on from this, Talon Space Combat, ship to ship. So this is apparently solitaire friendly, although I have not played it using that mode, and I don't own it, but I have played the game at an Origins some years ago. It is, and it's designed by Jim Crone, the same designer as Space Empires 4X, and it is, in principle, you can like play out your Space Empires 4X space battles using this system. That joining is not quite piss. I am putting counters in the wrong place. That merger is not quite as seamless as I would like it to be, but nevertheless, there is nothing wrong with Talon at all. It is a perfectly good game. It does play. If you've played it and you feel like it plays a little bit like Starfleet Battles Light or Federation Commander Light, if you like. Then I think there's some truth to that. It does feel a lot like a very stripped down, much easier to play, much lighter and faster Starfleet Battles, as a couple of other folks have already pointed out. Mo from Mo's Game Deal. Mo, thanks for stopping by. And this is going to get reprinted with the next batch of the GMT stuff that's going to the printer as well. So I wouldn't use it as an add-on for Space Empires personally. If somebody has interest in doing that, good for them. I just feel like that would take a lot of time, a lot of extra time, and I'm not sure that I would feel the value in it, right? I would rather just get to the Space Empire stuff and resolve the combats with dice rolls in Space Empires, personally. But if there's people playing it this way, then cool. There's also an expansion for this, which is Talon 1000, which I think is just adds 1,000 scenarios. That's a lot of scenarios. So this is like a scenario construction kit. I don't think you're actually getting a 1,000-page book in this game. And as you can see, the counters are enormous. And the counters are dry erase, or wet erase, something like that. So you can actually you write directly on the counters with a dry or wet or whatever it is, erase marker. So physically, it's neat. It is a solid game. I just feel like I wouldn't play it with Space Empires in particular. If you want, okay. Stephen Rochelle points out that the Talon 1000 has extra ship types as well. I'm not sure I knew that. So, Adam Blinkenshop points out that there are additional ships as well. And hey, new ships is cool. You can always use new ships. So, moving on from Talon. If you're, now's the time to put in your P500 order for that if you want it. All right, Clash of Giants Civil War, designed by Ted Racer. Now, there are two previous Clash of Giants games, both of which are World War I games from Ted. And I was highly interested in those games at one point. And then I watched some video on Clash of Giants Civil War and kind of decided it wasn't for me, having not played it. This is a chit pull system. This particular game has Second, Manassas, and Gettysburg, and I'm not sure if there was a plan to do another one or not. It feels like this was reasonably well received. There's a decent amount of video on it on YouTube. There's 5 videos. That's something. But there are some videos about it on YouTube. Not 100% sure if any of this is the thing I watched. And if we look at, that's not what I was looking for. I was actually looking for the back of the box, which isn't here. And we don't have a scale here either, but it is on a hex grid. Ted is really good at World War I games. I will 100% agree with that. No, however, they are chit pull games, right? And Ted may have used some of the same techniques for, say, the Dark Valley that he used, which is a game I like a lot, for these two. So I'm not sure. That's actually a really good question. All right, so moving on from Clash of Giants Civil War. Silent Victory, U.S. submarines in the Pacific, 41 to 45. So for those of us who played The Hunters, which is an excellent game, which I may or may not have included in these episodes because technically the original version was Constant Press, although I believe it is just a straight GMT game now. One of Greg Smith's... I want to say that The Hunters was the game that kind of turned everybody on to Gregory M. Smith. This is one of the follow-ups to that. It's U.S. submarines in the Pacific. I haven't played this. I have played The Hunters, and again, there's video of that on the channel from way, way back. Silent Victory appealed to me because there is in Cleveland, there is a Gato-class submarine from World War II, the USS Cod, and I've been on it. It's awesome. And their Gato-class submarine is in this game. That's why I bought this game. I would like to play it at some point. But I have not done so up to this point. It does kind of give you the Allied side using that mechanism, and American submarine strategy in the Pacific is not that there are more similarities between American submarine doctrine in the Pacific and German submarine doctrine in the Atlantic than there are between American submarine doctrine in the Pacific and Japanese submarine doctrine. Let me put it that way. So you'll get a lot of the same flavor out of this, except in the Pacific with Americans. So, yeah, there were a lot of duds, and that's reflected in this too. So with the early torpedoes in particular. All right, MBT from designer James Day, who Dan and I were pleased to interview on the Chit Show a couple of weeks ago. let me get to this in a second, because kind of. So MBT is a reprint, new edition using the new iteration of the Panzer rules for modern tank battles. So it is a new edition of an Avalon Hill game, but it has been substantially revised from that, is my understanding. So, Chris Yap asks, is there a World War I version of the Hunter? So, not exactly, but kind of there is. There's a game called Raiders of the Deep from Compass, which is basically exactly that thing, except it's Austro-Hungarian. Might be might be Central Power submarines. I'm not sure if there's Germans in it or not, but I know that it has Austro-Hungarian submarines, which is also, again, pretty neat because it's not something we see very often. So you want to look at that. And as John C. points out, if you want Italian submarines in the Med, then Beneath the Med is the game. And I believe they even have the... Let me not say that because I'm not sure it's an accurate statement. So, but Beneath the Med's pretty cool. All right, Comancheria by Joel Toppin. This is another of Joel's games. It is a solitaire game set in the American West. In this case, the rise and fall of the Comanche Empire. Second game in Mr. Toppin's First Nations series. And it is somewhat similar to Navajo Wars. I have not played any of these. They're supposed to be good. Is this Nemo's War that you're speaking of here? That was originally from Victory Point Games, and it's now from Tabletop Tycoon. That's the reason they bought Victory Point Games. So, Joel makes good videos, too, and good Vassal modules, so he is a talented fellow. And I believe this has been printed at least a couple of times as well. Interesting. There's a Czech edition of this. Didn't see that coming. Apparently, there might be more international versions of this. A lot of GMT games have non-English versions, but BGG has always been inconsistent about actually listing those. So moving on from Comancheria. Time-wise, we're doing okay, but I do have 8 games left to do. Several of which I've played. All right, so Falling Sky is another entry in the Coin series by Volko and Andrew Runke. This is Caesar's campaigns in Gaul, and the game kind of frames it as a counterinsurgency type of thing. I'm not 100% sure that I would take that exact language too seriously, but there are certainly elements of that totally work within the Coin mechanism. I've played this one. I think it's pretty good. I think this is also a pretty good introductory. It's not necessarily the simplest Coin game, but it is on the simpler side. So, well, what probably is going on here is that there's a Czech publisher that reached out to GMT and said, hey, we'd like to do some of your games, and this is what they've done so far. That's probably all it is, rather than some untapped market on American West stuff in the Czech Republic, would be my guess. So Falling Sky, solid game, in my opinion, and an attractive game. There is an expansion for this, which is called Ariovistus, which brings in like a 5th faction in a new scenario. There's kind of an NP, there's the typical 4-player factions. There's also kind of a 5th faction in Falling Sky that operates according to its own rules. I feel like, so I've owned and have read Falling Sky and have played it. I have never owned and have not read, but have played Cuba Libre, and Cuba Libre feels simpler to me. Again, the difference is not huge on the GMT 1 to 9 scale. It's probably the same number, probably a 5 or 6, maybe 6. I don't know. Who you ask is going to have a huge difference. Yes, so it's the Germans basically rather than the Gauls. That is correct. But solid game. I don't think I have the expansion, but I might. I'm not sure. This is why I keep this shit in a spreadsheet, frankly. Well, remember Cuba Libre is one of the earlier ones, right? So you don't have the lines of communication. One of the things that keeps Cuba Libre a little simpler is there's not as many spaces on the map, so the decision space, just based on positions, is not as big, and that makes it a little more approachable. Rather than there necessarily being a big margin of complexity difference between, say, this and Falling Sky. This also does not have the lines of communication, but it does have the fifth faction that you normally wouldn't have to deal with. So, all right, moving on from that. I would have normally left this out if not for the Jeff and Carla Horger news that we had earlier tonight. So I will do this again. For those who don't know and didn't catch the beginning of the show, Carla Horger passed away last week. I found out about this in the last day or two. Carla was Jeff's right hand when it came to game design, development, all this stuff. She has a bunch of design credits on her own. And this was very depressing. We want to help Jeff out. So there is a GoFundMe for Jeff, who is disabled on his own, right? So he could use a hand. There's a GoFundMe for Jeff. Check it out. I just threw another link into the video into the chat. This is a racing game. Would I play this if I was like, hey, I got nothing to do, I'm at a convention, hey, want to play Grand Prix? Sure, no problem. I would try it. This is not in my wheelhouse at all, however. So, but these are very popular. This and Thunder Alley are both very and the Apocalypse Road. All people like these games. So if this is a topic of interest to you, do check this out, and check out the GoFundMe for Jeff as well. All right, so moving on, Liberty or Death, the American Insurrection from Harold Buchanan. I have played this twice, I believe, and I like this game a lot. I do think maybe it's perhaps not imbalanced in favor of either the French or the Native Americans, but it is easily exploited in favor of the French or the Native Americans. I think there are probably counters for that. But nevertheless, I do think this is a very good game. The 4-player positions here are the Americans, or, well, no, it's just the Americans, the British, the French, and the Native Americans. There is a significant Native American impact on the American Revolution, I think, and French impact too. And I think that you could theoretically get the wrong idea about that from playing this game. That those factions, particularly if they win, are a little more impactful than they necessarily were. The French are super impactful, though. There's a bunch of those late war battles in the Revolutionary War. The French helped out a lot on. So, and you can tell by going to the cemeteries when the names are 3/4 French people. So, no, this is just the American Revolution. There was stuff going on in the American Revolution with the Native Americans as well, though. So, and the map is gorgeous. The map is a Terry Leeds map. I think this map is friggin' stunning. I really like this map. All that said, I will say that in my personal rankings of coin games, this is another one that I used to say, depending on when you asked me, was like my favorite coin game. And I don't think it is anymore. I think it is probably number 3 for me, maybe number 4, behind Fire in the Lake, Pendragon, and possibly A Distant Plane. I still think it's a good game. I think it's worth playing. I think it's fun. But I do think it can mask some incorrect assumptions about the American Revolution. But again, I do think it's a solid game and worth playing. All right, so what we have here is, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this either because it's a reprint and I probably should have just skipped it. This is the 25th anniversary reprint of Silver Bayonet. It is somewhat expanded. There's a lot. I've got this. It's Operational Vietnam, which is not something we see a lot of. Now, somebody might argue with me about operational based on the size of the units here, but I'm going to tell you, having done this, and played some of these games, that the unit scale here, which is roughly companies, is kind of operational for a lot of Vietnam engagements, including these. So this is Ia Drang. If you've seen the movie We Were Soldiers, which is very good, with Mel Gibson and Sam Elliott and some other people. this is basically those battles. I heard the book's really good too. I've got the book. I need to read it. So, I really want to try Red Dust Rebellion 2, to be honest about it. And Carl agrees with me that it's operational. And I think if you play it, you will agree. I think it's just, you might get the wrong impression if you haven't played an operational Vietnam game, because how many operational Vietnam games are there? Half a dozen ever? So, Mike Reed says this is nearly a total redesign from the original Silver Bayonet. Not sure I knew that. This is the one I have. I don't have the original. Also a strong Roger McGowan cover, in my opinion. There we go. Everybody wants a little tutorial on Red Dust Rebellion. I'll get a chance to play it sooner or later. That might happen at Buckeye Game Fest. Might happen at Origins. Who knows? I'm not desperate yet. Or I might just buy it in the sale. That could happen too. I probably should have just P500 in it. But for me, that's what the sales are for. Because I don't want to P500 absolutely every friggin' thing. Not that I do. But I feel like I'm like heavily committed to GMT's P500 mechanism at this point, and I'm reluctant to like sign up for more stuff. So sometimes I skip things, and then I end up regretting those things. Sometimes it ends up being something I forget about, so I don't care. So as I recall, there are both the British faction includes both British Army regulars and Patriot militia, if I am remembering this correctly. And the Americans have both American militia and the Continental Army as separate things. Continental Army is a little better, but not as good as the British regulars or the French regulars. All right, next up is Won by the Sword by Ben Hall. I feel like we covered this already. Did we not cover this already? This is Great Campaigns of the 30 Years' War. It is on this point-to-point map. This is a game that's another one of those things where GMT released it, and it was not well received, and there was an update kit of some kind, which is apparently roughly 2 years later, which includes new rulebook, new playbook, new charts and tables, some errata counters, what looks like a whole new deck of cards, and a bunch of other stuff. So I would suggest that if you do find this topic of interest, and it is an interest, 30 Years War is an interesting topic, and if you play with the updated stuff, it's supposed to be pretty good. You do want the updated stuff, though. So you'd have to be careful. If you want to, yeah, absolutely. There are rooms set up for that. If you want to do that, 100%. Adam, if you need an invite, I'm not sure if you're in the Ardwulf Discord server or not. If you need an invite, send me an email at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. It's also in the ticker down at the bottom of the screen, and I will get you set up with an invite. So... no, I'm thinking, I mean, this is also true of Clash of Monarchs, but I think it's true of this one too. There we go. So there you go. I might be interested too, but for me, the problem would be finding the time. We're having a lot of time problems here. But yeah, anybody that's in the server, go to town on any of the voice chat rooms that are set up. There's rooms set up for war games, RPGs. There's even one set up for video games, which to my knowledge, no one has ever used. So, but the other ones have been used here and there. All right. So next up is Unconditional Surrender, World War II in Europe. Now, there's also a game called Unconditional Surrender Case Blue, which appeared in an issue of C3I, which is just a little mini excerpt of this basically, but it's much simpler because you don't have to worry about any of the super high level strategic stuff or the diplomacy or any of that. And there's Unconditional Surrender Western Campaigns, which is still on P500 and has been for quite a long time. I like this game. I do have there's things I don't like about it. I don't like the diplomacy system. Some people have complained about the map. I disagree with those complaints because, I will show you what I mean, because here it is. So you'll notice that this map appears to be somewhat distorted from the World War II war game maps that we typically see. This is a smart projection to have picked, because here Norway's not bigger than France. That's why, because up in Scandinavia, you get enormous distortion on a lot of different map projections, and this helps to alleviate that. There's also some hexes up there that are out of play, which also kind of helps, but this is a good, smart choice of map projection on whether it was Sal's part, Sal Vast as the designer, whether that was the choice or not. What I don't like is the diplomacy system. I think the diplomacy system feels rudimentary and weird. However, the beat to beat gameplay, I think, is really strong with one other reservation, which is that it would be my preference for a game like this at this complexity level to take less than 50 hours to play. And that's about what you're looking at for unconditional surrender. Maybe you can do it in 25. I don't know. But I do feel like the play time is longer than I would like it to be for the kind of game that it, and the scope of game and all that it is. However, again, I think the core mechanic, and it's got a single core, well, it kind of all orbits around a single core combat resolution mechanic, which I think is very clever. You move units individually. They have, I'm not sure what they're called, but they're basically action points, and you move that unit until you're out of action points. And you can either you can move with action points, you can attack with action points, or you can set your troops up to do a prepared attack on a specific hex, which is where you can get the multi-hex attacks in. I think it's super clever. I think the beat-to-beat gameplay on this, I think, is really strong. I would just like to see it a little faster playing, and not the diplomacy system, which is why I will buy Unconditional Surrender Western campaigns. So good job on this, Sal. I think it's a strong game. Next up is Thunder Rally. Again, it's Jeff and Carla Horger. I've just talked about this. So if you are interested in racing games, these are supposed to be excellent, and they're BGG ratings. And this is one of those kinds of games where I think BGG ratings probably do have something to them. The BGG ratings are pretty good on both of these. Thunder Rally seems to be the one that I see getting played more than the other one, but I could be wrong about that. And I think, well, again, I think Sal made the right. Assuming it was Sal that made that decision, I imagine it was. I think it was a wise choice. I think that map projection is actually very good. Another way you can try out the core mechanic is by looking into Unconditional Surrender Case Blue, but that wasn't an issue with C3I, and unless you could score it on its own, you might have trouble finding it without spending $100 on an out of print back issue of C3I. I do have Unconditional Surrender Case Blue. All right, and our last game that we're going to cover tonight, and the timing works out rather well, is Blood and Roses by the late and legendary Richard Berg. This is the third game in the Men of Iron series, and it is War of the Roses battles. In particular, we have first, I don't know jack about any of these with the possible exception of Bosworth. First and second, St. Albans, Blore Heath, Towton, Barnet, Tewkesbury, and Bosworth. So Bosworth is where Richard III gets it. So that's the one a lot of people end up knowing about. I have there was also an additional battle, the Battle of Wakefield, that appeared in C3I. It's kind of a standalone thing, but this is the Men of Iron game that it fits into. There you go. Mark knows his, unsurprisingly, Mark knows his Richard III. There is a modern costumed and staged version of Richard III on film starring Ian McKellen as Richard III, which is excellent and which I highly recommend people watch. Case Blue, it's an excellent travel game. My travel game is a laptop that I have Vassal on. So usually it's not a problem because I'm going somewhere to play games anyway, and I don't need more games with me. So, yeah, I have not seen. I'm aware of the situation. They found Richard III buried under what is now a parking lot. They were doing some excavation, and they're like, "Oh, look at oh shit, it's a corpse." or I don't know if it was a corpse or a coffin or what, but it turned out to be Richard III. So this is there, and there was a documentary about this. So this is a great question. So I have a pretty high opinion. I'm less interested in War of the Roses battles than I am like the other topics that are in the Men of Iron tri-pack, which is how I would obtain this game at this point. But I like the system a lot. It's easy to play. It doesn't take very long. It's a nice light war game that nevertheless has a good historical feel. Part of that may be my own ignorance because I don't know jack about literally any of these except for Bosworth and not much about that. So they call it a car park in the UK. I am aware of that. I said parking lot because I do occasionally look at the demographics and I know how many people from the UK are watching this every week. So The Last King, there you go. Good. The Lost King. So there is, I think, a general vibe that lots of folks, historians are reevaluating Richard III. Let me put it that way. We'll see what comes of that in the long term. So let me pull this down and pull this down since we are done. So I want to get this GMT series done. All right. That does not necessarily mean that we'll do it again next week because we've done it 2 or 3 weeks in a row and I might want to break. But we'll need at least 2 and maybe 3 more episodes to cover GMT, say up to 2020. I could probably cut it after 2020, couldn't I? So we might do that. That show might run a little bit long. Nevertheless, we have seen a whole bunch of really nice GMT games and some that I'm personally interested in here tonight. There you go. Yeah, that's a good point. This might be an interesting read as well. All right, so what ID Jester, thanks for stopping by. Everything is groovy. So, what's going on for the rest of the week? I don't know what's going on. What is going on for the rest of the week? So, we have, I was going to do it on Thursday because that's when the unboxings were happening, but then I had the Thursday, we had the Chit Show on Thursday, so I moved it to Wednesday. There will be an unboxing of Columbia Game, or I should say Kickstarter preview, because Kickstarter's still up, of Quebec 1759 from Columbia Games. They were kind enough to send me a preview copy. It is the first block war game. This is a big, fancy new edition of it. It's not terribly expensive. And I think it will ship, as Columbia's Kickstarters tend to, it will not ship with any egregious delays. So it's worth a look if you are interested in Quebec 1859 as a topic, or in block war games, or you want to see what the very first block war game looks like. And it doesn't look like they've changed very much. So from what I can tell. There you go. There you go. Yeah, so they actually had, I don't know if silk screened or embossed or something like that, but they were quite fancy blocks at the time. And then they went to the stickers. The current ones are stickers. I spent, instead of clipping counters during the week, I actually stickered some blocks for both Alliance, which I'll be playing in a couple of weeks. That's not Origins. I'm gonna run it at Winterfest as just an evening thing and see who wants to play. But then we're gonna do it at Origins too. So I stickered all of Alliance and I stickered Quebec 1859 as well. So I'm not sure about this. I haven't looked at the rules particularly. I could tell you it's not expensive though. Or it's not complicated. Let me put it that way. But if you want it, the Kickstarter will be running more or less for the rest of the week. So if you're interested, maybe check out the unboxing, or the Kickstarter preview is what it's called, video on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, and maybe make the decision at that point. Who does the production for Whirligig? I have no idea. I would imagine. I don't know. To be completely honest, I don't know, and anything I said would be speculative. So I don't own any of their games. I would like to play. John Company is the one I would like to play specifically. There is a Hearts of Iron Kickstarter board game up right now. I didn't highlight that because that to me that's like an out of hobby thing. It's based on the video game, and we've seen a bunch of those in the last couple of years for various Paradox Studios grand strategy games. I haven't even looked at this. I bought the Europa Universalis one because that looks pretty impressive. I at least looked at the Crusader Kings one, but then realized I'd rather not. I have tons of stuff in the space of World War II strategic stuff. I don't need a Hearts of Iron. I don't even like the current version of the video game. I like Hearts of Iron 3 better. So, yeah, John Company, they've done 3 or 4 things now, I think. I've played Pax Pamir, and I think it's an interesting game. I wasn't like in love with it though. It's clever. I thought it was well designed. I wasn't like super into it as a topic. John Company, I think, is potentially more interesting to me as a topic, and that is, that East India Company. It's an interesting topic, right? So, and Civilization VII, the video game, is coming out, so there's that as well. If you're interested in that, by all means, check it out. I believe Gwendolyn Christie will be doing the voiceovers for this particular one. Civ 4, I think, was Leonard Nimoy. I think. I forget who did 5 and 6. I have all of them. I have Civ 4, 5, and 6. And I put a total of 5 hours into all 3 games put together. Civ 2, on the other hand, back in like the 90s, I played the shit out of. So I wasn't sure what Ed's involvement with the Civ is now. But I know that Ed Beach, the designer of Here I Stand, as Adam points out, has been involved with previous versions of the game. I just wasn't sure if that was still current a thing or not. So, I have not seen of the Apple TV show. I think Severance is on Apple TV, and this is supposed to be good. Along with Silo is supposed to be good. A bunch of other things on Apple TV are supposed to be good. What I have watched on Apple TV, I do not have a current subscription. I have watched For All Mankind. I've watched the first season. I do feel like it kind of went off the rails toward the end of the first season. I watched the first season of Foundation, which went off the rails. There's the first episode is quite good, and it's either the second, third, or fourth episode that I thought was outstanding, even though it wasn't particularly faithful to the books. Everything else I've seen about that, I have seen of that show, and I have watched the entire first season, but not the second season, has made me irritated. So I don't really want to deal with it at this point. That said, at some point I will subscribe to Apple TV again, and I will probably watch the rest of it. But that's probably not going to happen until season 3 is out, which will be sometime this year, I think. Also, Ted Lasso is awesome, for the record. So there's that. Yes, there is a second season of Foundation, and a third season is coming. I don't know if it's getting more than 3 or not, but a third season is in. I don't know if it's done filming or what, but we're supposed to get a third season. I think there's actually a trailer for it on the internet. In fairness, this is actually hilarious. Every time I mention it, I think of this exact thing. In fairness, it is a very difficult property to turn into a movie or TV show. Okay, so I want to give the people making the show some slack for that. But admitting that does not mean I have to like it either. So there's that. For All Mankind, opening For All Mankind up, I think it is really cool. However, I think it gets. I don't think it pays enough attention to big sweeping dramatic events, and instead gets into personal stories for characters we don't particularly care about. That was my issue with the second half of the first season, or maybe just the last couple episodes of the first season of For All Mankind. The second season is supposed to be pretty good, but it looks like it kind of does the same thing. I don't know. Again, I'll look at it when I eventually resubscribe to Apple TV. I am more likely to resubscribe to Max or HBO Plus or whatever the fuck they're calling it now. All right, folks, we are out of time. So one last thing. There is no Chit Show on Thursday. The Chit Show is off of Thursdays. There will be a Chit Show next Sunday evening, February, I think it's the 9th. It's the 8th. Hold on. since I'm saying it on the air, I should actually get it correct. Sunday, February 9th will be the Chit Show. I can make it work. And our very special guest will be Mr. Stigler, by the way. So definitely tune in for that. But there will be no Chit Show this Thursday. So if you tune in, it will be, well, I don't care. I don't need to watch the Super Bowl. It's not like the Browns are in it, is there? So there's that. Babylon 5 is back on Prime, which is awesome. So, and I think it might be somewhere else too right now. I'm not sure. Totally worth your time if you haven't seen it. All right, folks. We have had a great evening. Thanks everybody for coming by. Do check out the GoFundMe for Carla. I'll throw it in the chat one last time. And everybody have a great rest of the night. We'll see you all again soon.